Now, for more on China's northeast provinces and some of the changes expected there, let's cross over to current affairs commentator Einar Tangen in Beijing. Einar, thank you for joining us. How do you explain provinces like Chongqing growing 11% in 2015, whereas in Liaoning, one of the first areas in China to be industrialized, it only grew 3% that year? Why is that?
Well, it's not unusual, Karina. This is a phenomenon that's happened in almost all post-industrial societies. You can look at the United States, you can look at Europe. The factories that fuel the initial growth, this primary growth, do very well, and then they start to lag off as that industry moves elsewhere. You saw this in England during the late 1800s, all the way through the 1900s, and then into the United States. So China is just going through the growing pains of readjusting what has been a very things. Now remember, this area was providing 17% of the GDP when you start looking at the 50s to the 80s. It's just today that it's dropped down to about 19%.
Okay, so the area that was 9%. Once dominated by so it's an area that was once dominated by the production of steel, cars, aircraft, and ships, hence the name Rust Belt. But the Chinese government says it wants to revitalize the area. Should we expect to see the industries completely change, or just change in terms of the way they manufacture and the technology?
Well, I think you can see a little bit of both. In order to survive, they have to be competitive. And to be competitive, they have to start investing in the new processes, new machinery, and get to the point where they can do it. But you're also seeing a bleeding away as different groups start to look elsewhere for cheaper labor, for better markets, etc. China is not going to always lead the primary processing game. That is intended to start kind of going towards other areas. So competitiveness is going to depend on how well they can adapt to these circumstances.
Now, I know we just heard a story about one company in the northeast of China that was privatized and has thrived. Is there much interest in taking over some of these state-owned enterprises?
Well, there's a lot of interest, but there's also trepidation. Exactly what are the things? Remember, these state-owned enterprises had very cushy arrangements with the government. The contracts were with them, so it started this kind of ecosystem, this culture of going back and forth. When you're coming in, the question is, are you going to have orders, and where are those orders coming from? Within China, outside China? So once again, competitiveness is going to be the key. Anybody going in there needs to know that there will be a way for them to sell existing and into the future.
Now, you said they had a sort of a cushy arrangement with the government. Do you think the government, though, is going to be doing more to promote private investment? And if so, how?
Well, they've been trying. I mean, this is not a new subject. In 2003, they started this off. It was reaffirmed in 2009. Here we are in 2016. And the government is showing a lot of impatience at this point. They feel that they've put a lot of money into this area. They've tried to loosen things up, but you still see an area which is 70% dominated by the SOEs. It's been a very intractable problem. As I said, it's related both to the industries, the SOEs themselves, and the very close relationship they have with local governments. Remember, as the primary job providers there, local governments are very, very loath to see them go away. Even though they see the long term, it does not look good for them. So it's a very, very delicate thing. The government is moving infrastructure. It's trying to encourage these things. But in the end, the market has to see opportunities there. You have to see that there are assets that are underutilized, that there is a way to make money from this area using the natural advantages of this. And part of that is the labor. Labor wages in this area are only 60% of what they would be in Shenzhen. So this kind of natural thing should occur. You see these things moving around.
Okay. Well, Einar, you mentioned a little bit of frustration on the part of the Chinese government. Now, the government said the area should achieve medium-high growth by 2020. That's only 4 years from now. Is that enough time?
Well, it depends on how aggressive the government wants to get about this. There are within the government itself, there are different factions, or I say different ideas about how hard you push this. I think Lee is really looking for a market-oriented reform. He'd like to throw this open. But some of these are sensitive industries, and there are old line people who believe that you have to safeguard these and that the transition should be slower. So a lot of this is going to depend on just how hard the government pushes. Now, having said that, the government cannot do all of it. This is a situation where it has to be met halfway by the private sector in terms of their interest in this area.
Right. Well, we'll have to see if that interest is there. Thank you so much, Einar. We'll have to leave it there. That was current affairs commentator Einar Tangen in Beijing.
If you like what you just saw, follow us on social media and visit our website, CCTV-America.com.